The trial is in session. The client is charged with breaking Rule 1793 of Interdimensional law. How does the defense plead? Sebastian hated the courts of the many lands. It was so hard to wrap his mind around the concept. He had been a simple country lawyer without all that fancy training that the big city folks have. Simple disputes was all he was meant to cover. Then Sebastian had met Valasar. Valasar, as it turned out, had been an illegal immigrant of fundamentally confusing proportions. When they had first met in the middle of nowhere England, Sebastian had been asked to defend his client's right to stay in the country. Really confusing thing was that he was required to take the case before he was allowed to look at it. Curiosity got the better of him. He was planning to turn it down if it was impossible regardless, and so Sebastian accepted. From the moment the lawyer took the case, his life completely changed. At first he had seen small confusing details. Place of origin: Glasgow number 9347 was written. Name: unpronounceable with only one set of lips. Called Valasar for ease. Occupation: man meant to be holding up Sector 3 of the planet. Not a single one of the details made sense. He hoped to get some clarity when he actually met the client. He had many questions about the file. How could someone be an immigrant if their place of origin was the country they are an immigrant to? A car pulled up and a man opened the door. Sebastian was already regretting his decision, but by the looks of the people, he wouldn't have organs if he refused. "You been briefed on your client?" the man in the black suit asked. Sebastian nodded. "Good. Look, I get it. This is confusing. Just get in the car and put on the hat and everything will become clear. Well, maybe clear isn't the right word." Sebastian knew better than to argue. He had met with mobsters before. He was aware of their tactics. The hat was actually a top hat, not a strange device like the lawyer had prepared himself for. The person in the seat next to him, who was holding out the hat, gave him a friendly smile, but there was a sadness behind his eyes. Sighing, Sebastian rose the top hat to his head, slowly moving it up until the person next to him, whether in annoyance or knowing how stressful the situation to be, forced the hat downwards. The moment the hat touched his head, Sebastian's world, all worlds, changed. Welcome, enter user name here to the quick boot program of Interdimensional law. A robotic voice appeared in the void Sebastian now found himself in. You have been selected to be the lawyer for enter case here. This case has been designated as Code Yellow Importance Case. If this is your first time with Interdimensional law, please press 1. A keypad appeared in front of him. He looked at it confused, but didn't hesitate to slam the 1 button. This was a mistake, was his only thought. You have selected 1. That you have never taken part in any form of interdimensional law. As this is the case, we are required to show you this quick presentation on what is happening to you and what kind of case you will be working for. For your level of dimension and a scan of your intelligence, version P has been selected as the perfect candidate for the presentation. Please enjoy the show while the necessary maintenance is taking place. The curtains that hadn't existed in the void parted, and suddenly a puppet appeared. He looked like some kind of human, but a poor representation of one. A tune started playing in the background. Was he being treated as a child? Sebastian wondered. The song, as it turned out, covered many things of universally difficult proportions, but in a way that somehow Sebastian was able to follow along with. The Can Choir of Earth showed how the universe branched off with every decision made. At first there was 1, then 72,500, then far too many flying legs, tentacles and wings to keep track of. A group of 5 people stood on top of it all, watching, making the fundamental laws of the universe, interdimensional law. What gave these 5 opera singers the power to create what is, or is not legal, was unclear, and Sebastian took it as it wasn't important for him to ask that specific question. Just accept it and move on. Then came the solos. Examples of past cases where the laws were put into practice. Universe hopping was the first thing they made sure to slam down on. This was where Sebastian's case came from. All the smaller points made sense now. Well, maybe not the occupation, but that might just be due to his universe's laws. Other examples came up. The most interesting was Schrodinger's law, sung by a duet of puppets of a cat both alive and dead. Apparently, it was possible to break the laws of quantum physics, and very dangerous to do so. As the song came to a close, Sebastian realised how deep of a mistake he had made. This was far above a simple immigration dispute. This was dealing with law that most did not know existed. How could he claim to be defending his client if he didn't understand what the law was? Upload at 100%. Congratulations, enter username here. You have now qualified as an interdimensional lawyer. Your certificate will be awaiting you when you return to reality not found. What? Sebastian thought. He was suddenly qualified? How? What had that play done to him? The room began to disappear as the car came back into focus. The man sitting next to him gave him a soft smile. Confusing, isn't it? He said. I was the same when I first joined the realm of interdimensional lawyers. A bit of a hint for you though. This is not going to slow down, so you might want to just enjoy the ride. But it said I'm qualified. But it didn't teach me anything. What is Schrodinger's law? The stranger next to him asked. Obviously, that if the box is opened while the quantum flux is still taking place, then the consequence of doing so must be decided by two courts, one alive and one dead. The consequences will be both severe and non-existent if found guilty, much more and less lenient if found innocent and guilty. Wait, how do I know that? And how did I just talk in such gibberish? Question 2, same topic. Can you be found both guilty and guilty? The stranger gave a grin. Only if you plead guilty to two realities. If so, because the quantum flux has been resolved in that moment, you are actually deemed innocent and must only pay for the reparations of destruction you wrote by opening the box pre-quantum entanglement. Can you please tell me what is going on? Good. Seems that you've had enough room upstairs for the law to be embedded. While you were watching what I can only assume was the song and dance version of the explanation, the hat implemented the universal law in your head. You won't think of it much, but it is in there when you might need it. The man held out a sheet of paper which read, Sebastian Alexander Randowski, number 832, qualified practitioner of interdimensional law. I know the initiation seems confusing now, but we have arrived and it's only going to get worse from here. The name's Van, with a silent PH and a hidden G. Sebastian was taken to meet his client, a half-human, half-purple monkey with 3 mouths and a nose on each of his knuckles. Sebastian stood there before collecting himself. It may be the craziest thing he had seen so far, but a client was entitled to respect. Besides, he had seen a human who was more tattooed than a man, so that was what he tried to think of as he sat down with a being known as Valasar. So for my cases, you jumped dimensions from 9347 to universe 1173, the Amazonian monkey-made planet to be specific. Can't blame you, sounds fantastic. Any reason I should know that would help me to stop you going for the slammer outside of space and time? I did nothing wrong, Valasar said, only intelligible due to the translator Sebastian had been given on his way to the room. Standard protocol for anyone who came here. My mother was an Amazonian-made monkey. My father was a Titan. I have dual citizenship. Sebastian sighed. We both know dual citizenship on a dimensional level can only last the first cosmic cycle. You are, according to my files, 8,937 years old, cosmic calendar. You should have decided on your universe 3,000 years ago. The words falling out of his mouth were insane. 8,000? How can anything be alive that long? Valasar snorted, or at least that's what the translator decided was the appropriate noise. Whatever was happening was dangerously close to vomiting in the human's eyes. I think you mean 8,973 and a half. Besides, I didn't reach adulthood until 1,000 years ago. I can't decide my fate until I'm old enough, and by then it is too late by the dimension's laws. It's discrimination, I tells you. Sebastian nodded, understanding this case wasn't as cut and dry as he had been led to believe. He'd assumed this client wouldn't have a defence and had planned to get him a lenient sentence of cryostasis until the universal tear had repaired itself, and a universal ankle anchor for the rest of the time. Where he was getting these ideas from was a complete mystery. But the young 8,000-year-old did have a point. How could he decide if he wasn't allowed to make the decision? More questions were needed. But why now? You've had 1,000 years to make the decision. To be honest, it would have been easier to defend you if this was in the first 200 years or so. But 1,000? I was saving up money for the dimensional shift. It isn't cheap to build a transdimensional wormhole generator, you know. You space lawyers get it for free and think it is so easy to just hop between universes. God, why did they have to give me a human to defend me? I'm going to be sentenced to a lifetime imprisonment in the timeless prison, aren't I? This wasn't the first time that the client had lamented getting Sebastian, but it was the first time it was due to his species and not his skills. The lawyer sighed. Look, I didn't get to choose you either. Here are the facts. Currently you have torn a hole in the space, time and universal continuum. You have a legitimate defence, but you have had a cooling off period. The fact that you didn't contact the Dimensional Fuzz with what should have been paperwork has turned into an ordeal. But you are somehow still young, so you might be able to use your age and freedom for your defence. You aren't the first person who hopped a little too late and still got away with it. The being nodded, shuffling his feet. The bigger issue is that once you arrived on the Maid Monkey planet, the fact you are 100 feet tall and weigh double the weight of the actual planet itself, you destroyed it. So we are not only here for the dimensional hopping, but also for the genocide of the Maid Monkeys. Valasar nodded, looking upset. I understand I did wrong, but can you blame me for making that mistake? My mother was a maid monkey. At my size, you would assume the planet would be bigger. Sebastian nodded. I'll admit that threw me as well. The problem here is that you are being tried for 3 million counts of murder and 1 count of theft. I think with the lack of knowledge about other universes, we might be able to get away with the murder thing. Although, that one will be dicey. We fall back to, once again, proper procedure and how you failed to do it. The real issue is the theft. Valasar seemed confused, his purple tail forming a question mark, a symbol that really just added to the confusion of Sebastian. Where did the dot at the end come from? I didn't steal anything, he exclaimed. Sebastian sighed. The human pressed a buzzer and a giant, well, at least giant to the human, golden statue was wheeled in. Recognise it? Sebastian looked at one of the eyes of the Titan monkey thing. He couldn't look at both simultaneously due to the size difference. Oh, the toothpick. But I just used it. I didn't steal it. It's a bell from an ancient civilization. Rule 239 of the Peace Between Universes Pact of the Galactic Year 1980 clearly states that you cannot take items that are part of an ancient history of a race that inhabits a planet. Did you do literally any research before you built a dimensional door that shattered a hole between your universes? The human began to rub his head. Thankfully the laws were infused in his mind, and he couldn't believe these words were coming out of his mouth. Only last week he was trying to reverse a parking fine, and now mass genocide and ancient golden bells being used as toothpicks? Well, maybe if there had been a sign saying, do not touch, I would have left it alone. Valasar grunted, in a howl that took the lawyer by surprise. There were signs, 87 of the damn things. They were just in a language you didn't know and chose to ignore. Did you not think that people screaming at you and throwing spears might have been a sign that you were doing wrong? On my planet, hitting someone with a stick is seen as a compliment. Are you telling me they weren't calling me beautiful? No, of course not! Sebastian had to cough. Okay, here is what we are going to do. We will contest dimensional shift, we will dispute the claims of genocide, but you will have to plead guilty through a lack of understanding for the theft. We're probably looking at forced servitude for the universe you jump to repay all the damages, and relocation if you choose to stay in that universe after your sentence. Sound good? Well, let's talk over what to say to the judge. The case went fairly well by Sebastian's standards. The punishment was harsher than what he had claimed. As well as servitude, Valasar would have to wear a dimensional lock for the rest of the time to make sure he never tried to run from the dimensional losses again. But he would be mostly free one day. The case became a landmark one for the age of decision making, as Sebastian had come to receive requests for more jobs in interdimensional law. He had not expected this place to be his calling, but it was enjoyable to work in a field that he hadn't expected he would be somewhat decent in. So, 3 weeks. Sorry about that. The week I was due to upload was a punch in the gut in the reality world, so I ended up just saying I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. I'm not perfect and sometimes I need to reset my brain. Finally, it is out, and I promise a video next week. Even if it has been 3 weeks, my promise was a video every 2 weeks. I already have the idea, I already have the outline, I just need to record it. As for progress, on that front I've done well. I've read all but one chapter and the epilogue, done all the edits and added in narrator's parts. I said I wanted editing draft 2 to be done by the end of February, and we're well on track for that. Only downside on my end is that Tuesday is a national holiday, and I do not work fantastic at home. But shouldn't stop me completing draft 2 next week. It is fun working out how the stories intertwine. Some of my comments earlier have come in use later, and adding in extra details for later have been fantastic, because it fleshes out the world. A fun one was how one character got training from another long in the past, and the effects ended up being beneficial for a story much further in the timeline. Ripple effects I had no idea about. If I'd have to compare Draft 2 to something, it would be like adding spices to dishes that I didn't realise would taste better for the inclusion of said spices. I am really enjoying it. As for the word count problem I mentioned in the last video, we'll leave that alone till next video. I don't want to jinx it. That'll do for today. So with all said and done, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I promise you a video next week and I will deliver on it. Catch you later. Bye.